Welcome to my world history notes, where I read from the book I wrote to teach homeschoolers world history. A Bible believer looks at world history. We're talking about the era and the rise of fascism in the first part of the 20th century, and you can purchase my book at Lulu.com, Amazon.com, or at the Bible Baptist Bookstore. So I'm going to start with Japan in this era. In Japan, during the era of the weak Emperor Taisho, 1912-1926, the political power shifted from the oligarchic clique, Genro, to the parliament and the democratic parties. In the First World War, Japan joined the Allied powers, but played only a minor role in fighting German colonial forces in East Asia. At the following Paris Peace Conference of 1919, Japan's proposal of amending a, quote, racial equality clause to the Covenant of the League of Nations was rejected by the United States, Britain, and Australia. Arrogance and racial discrimination towards the Japanese had plagued Japanese-Western relations since the forced opening of the country in the 1800s, and were again a major factor for the deterioration of relations in the decades preceding World War II. In 1924, for example, the U.S. Congress passed the Exclusion Act that prohibited further immigration from Japan. After World War I, Japan's economical situation worsened. After World War I, Japan's economic situation worsened. The Great Kanto earthquake of 1923 and the Worldwide Depression of 1929 intensified the crisis. The Great Kanto earthquake was one of the worst in history and destroyed Tokyo and Yokohama, killing nearly 140,000 people. The Treaty of Portsmouth, which President Theodore Roosevelt presided over in 1905, saw both Japan and Russia agree to evacuate Manchuria and return it to China. During the Russian Revolution of 1917, Japan began extending its influence into Manchuria to halt the spread of Bolshevism, Russia's form of communism. But still, Russia controlled outer Manchuria by 1925. Japan saw the threat of communism overshadowing Asia as a future and very real threat. American pressure forced Japan out of Russian-controlled territory. During World War I, a powerful Chinese warlord had gained control over Manchuria and tried to have his Manchurian army resist all foreign influences. Both Russia and Japan had their eyes on the rich mineral resources of Manchuria, though, and Japan was successful in assassinating the warlord. In 1931, a portion of a railway owned by Japan was dynamited by Japanese officers in the Mukden incident. The Japanese blamed it on Chinese saboteurs and invaded Manchuria. The former Chinese Emperor Puyi and his entourage were invited to come rule over the Japanese puppet state of Manchukuo. His acceptance of the title Emperor of Manchukuo resulted in Japanese control through the officers of the new state. With Chinese forming background units to fight against Japanese domination, it took several years of fighting for the Japanese to pacify the country. Now we're going to talk about Russia, what's coming up with Russia next, and we'll continue next time. I hope you'll study world history, have an interest in maybe some of the things that I say. You'll look into them yourself and come up with your own conclusions. I'm not expecting you to agree with me. I'm a Bible believer, and my perspective is as a Bible believer. But I do hope that you will find an interest in these subjects. Thank you.